Off, off hot. Well, hey everybody, welcome to today's session of Compost Academy. This is all about soil restoration professionals. This is highlighting the work of different living soil consultants who are doing this work of regenerating ecosystems by repairing soil biology. And these are people who have very unique spaces who really truly found their way of how to become professionals in restoring their soil and they found their own unique pathway of doing this. And so we're sharing two stories of soul consultants who found their own pathway, found their own niche, and who have really incredible stories. So I'm really excited to have Joe Tobias and Adam Cobb on. Joe, I've had the pleasure of knowing. I think we're going to have Joe go first. Joe, I've had the pleasure of knowing you for, oh boy, it's about 7 years now. During COVID, she helped me train in microscopy. She did such a good job, and she's such a wellspring of knowledge about soil biology. She truly helped me with coaching of understanding the processes of composting and doing biological composting, checking every step of the way and refining the processes. And it's really awesome seeing her work flourish in the clients that she works with. Like she's worked from everywhere from I think it was yeah, Thailand to BC and across Canada. It's really fantastic seeing her work. So it'll be exciting to see what she has to share today. So Joe, I'm going to pass it off to you, and we'll get started.
Joe, I think you're on mute. There you go.
Okay, thanks, Rally. What an intro. Wow. All right. Thank you for having me here today. I want to begin with this quote because it speaks of the path I've had, both as a person and as a professional. Uh, Character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experiences of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, vision cleared, ambition inspired, and success achieved. So, again, everyone, thank you for having me here today. I just want to do a little bit of introduction before we begin. My name is Joe Tobias, and I'm the founder of RootShootSoils, a company dedicated to regenerative soil practices and the use of living compost to rebuild biological function integrated landscapes. So, since 2015, I've worked alongside farmers across Western Canada mostly. And just over a year ago, I've been supporting a project or growers in Thailand, sugarcane growers looking to extend the lifespan of their crop. And at the heart of my work, it's a simple intention: helping land stewards build deeper, more meaningful relationships with their soil. And over the years, I've come to see high quality compost not just as an input, but as a catalyst. Catalyst bioamendments, Keisha and Casey. One that can kickstart the ecological processes in soil, like nutrient cycling, decomposition, plant soil microbial relationships. So, my journey in this work actually began in 2010 when I shifted from a background in computing science into the worlds of permaculture and then eventually soil ecology. A pivotal moment came during my visit to my family in the Philippines. So here's a picture of a rice farm. Fairly common thing to see when we're traveling between villages and visiting family from one village to another. You'd find a lot of rice farmers, sugarcane growers in the area, in the provinces anyway. And there I witnessed the long-term effects of the Green Revolution in the farming communities, as you probably already know, that movement basically promoted hybridized rice cultivars with the intensive use of chemical inputs, which then eventually displaced traditional growing practices and reduced the availability of heirloom varieties. So, rice is a staple crop in my country, the country where I'm from, and unfortunately, a lot of the heirloom varieties are starting to diminish because of that movement. So, it contributed to the erosion of local knowledge. And that experience in 2010 prompted in me a deeper commitment to do something other than computing science. So I did basically computing science for industries that for rich people essentially. And so I wanted to do something more meaningful in my career. And much like the organisms in my compost pile, I've had to decompose and reassemble my understanding of the world. And today, the data I work with tells a different kind of story. So, one of life and death, symbiosis, predator and prey. And so, hopefully, I can offer something that will prompt you to explore this avenue as part of your lives. And you're already doing that by being here today. And hopefully, today will solidify that decision for you. So when I show up to a site that looks something like this, it's never just about choosing a quick fix. There's also no such thing as a one size fits all solution. When soil looks like this, it's really the question becomes, how do we restore the biological function if it looks like this to begin with? But below that question, the deeper question is, what is the soil actually trying to tell us? As a consultant or a specialist, my job isn't just to throw a prescription at the problem, it's to help the client walk through a process. So the first thing I do is I start with an assessment. I pay attention to the soil. How is it functioning? Physically, biologically, and chemically. So recently I learned a new metaphor from my colleague and dear friend Javin Bernakovich, and that is a womb. So AWOMB. Soil is a womb. It's a nurturing, life-giving system. It serves as a metaphor, but also an acronym, which makes it really easy to remember. It stands for air, water, organic matter, minerals, and biology. Biology being the core that helps the wheels spin. And so that's exactly what I mean by starting with this assessment and understanding the properties of the soil. And then you want to understand the context. How did it get there in the first place? Talk to your client, how they or even the former land manager managed the land, because we can't improve the soil without understanding what shaped it. And then you want to explore possibilities. Again, there's no such thing as a one size fits all solution. You want to match the tools to the goals and the context. This is very resource driven. Time and I would say people are the two main resources that can limit the possibilities that you can work with. So in this case, understanding what your short-term strategies are and what your long-term solutions are, which will eventually get you and the client to where you want to go. And then adjust, prioritize, and do things in phases as best as you can. Again, this is very, very difficult to do. I find that when folks jump into a new alternative way of growing or with living soil, they tend to get really, really excited and they want to do everything at the same time. But this is where you kind of want to ground yourself and your client and come up with ways in which you can sort of compartmentalize and again, do things in phases. What can you do today that will give the most impact, but takes very little effort? And what can wait, which will provide the greater impact, but takes a lot of effort. So that's something that you would have to work with your client. And then observe and adapt. This is a given. Have the desired outcomes been achieved? How is the system responding? Nothing is going to respond in straight lines when working in this profession. Observing and adaptability are two very important practices in this world you're working with, or you could be working with, if it isn't your own property, and this is a business that you want to work with other farmers, for instance, they are business owners as well. And so this can be very difficult to do when your client also has a gazillion other things that they need to worry about on the farm. So helping ground them and making sure that they're focused on the task is also another thing that it's a skill that you kind of want to nurture as part of this profession. And you can see how I have an arrow going back to exploring possibilities here. So as you adapt, you might find that your strategies aren't working. So you want to explore other ones that you have in your toolbox. And then finally, you have monitoring, keep tuning, keep adjusting, stay curious. In this profession, you may even end up having long-term relationships with the clients that you've been working with because you joined them on a journey that brought pains and gains. So I'm going to share a couple of collaborations and case studies where living soil practices were put into action. The first one here is a green roof project. I like to call this an urban restoration project in the sky. So, one of the projects I was brought into involved collaborating with a company called Architect. It's a Vancouver based company specializing in living architecture. They had designed and installed multiple green roofs as part of this sort of like neo-futuristic skyscraper right in the heart of downtown Vancouver. The total green roof space is roughly 13,800 square feet, or shy of an acre. It's a pretty substantial space given the urban context. After the final installation in 2020, one of the managers reached out to me. He also happened to be one of my students in the past, and so that was where the connection came from. The plants were struggling, as you can imagine, in this type of environment. They're living in a concrete jungle, so they're basically, it's hot and dry in the summertime. So their design incorporated a lot of drought-tolerant native species like sedums, echinacea, yarrow, agastache, and so on. The substrate or growing medium, which I wouldn't necessarily call soil, it's approximately 3 inches thick, and it consists mostly of lava rock, perlite, and organic matter. In this case, I think they use compost. Before I came on board, their team also hired a third-party consultant to supply them with amendments. They were really expensive, and these amendments were in a liquid form, and they applied it once or twice, I believe, and it's a couple of provinces away, and there were no observable improvement in plant performance. They were really disappointed in that product, and so this is another reason why high quality compost is really an awesome tool in, uh, I guess, amending landscapes. So this is where our implementation plan, it was really trimmed down to a simple approach. Test for biology, apply compost extract, 7 to 14 days apart. This was all very, again, variable based on weather, based on resources, whether or not the team can make it on site. Because I'm not doing the applications myself, I made the applications for them, and then they would have to apply it because they needed to have special equipment to get on the roof, and I don't have the training, I don't have the skills, I don't have the equipment to basically tie myself to a piece of metal wire in order for me to treat this type of landscape or this type of context. And then do a post-treatment analysis, another biological soil analysis after the treatments are done. So this is the result of the test that I did for the team. The thing that stood out for me were the fungal biomass and the free living nematodes. In poor soils, especially those that either drain too quickly or stay saturated longer than you want, free living nematodes tend to be more sensitive. They rely on thin water films surrounding organic matter. So that's usually where they like to hang out, to move and feed. So when moisture conditions are inconsistent or extreme, their activity tends to decline over time. And so with fungi being so poor, that also tells me that the soil has poor structure, it has poor aggregation, which leads to poor water retention, infiltration, which then results in these nematodes not being able to survive. So first and second treatments happened back in March 2021, which was about 10 days apart. This was my first visit. And then while doing the third treatment, I noticed that nodding onions were starting to come up and the sedums were starting to fill in some of the gaps. And in June, this is what the roof looked like, June 2021. At this point, we finished all of the treatments, so it was only a total of 3 treatments at this point. They did irrigate the roof, but the irrigation was spotty. They were having issues with irrigation at that time. So I was actually really worried about how the plants were doing because this was also the time when we had a really terrible heat wave. This is mid-August 2021, and I had to basically contact the project manager and ask them, "Hey, how are the plants doing? Like it's been so hot. It's been we're see the sky is orange because we had forest fires at this time as well." So I was really worried, and I knew that the irrigation was also spotty, but it was really nice to see that the plants were flourishing despite the conditions that we were having at that time. And this is basically what it looked like from March to August of 2021. So here are more photos. So these spaces are pretty cool because they provide refuge and food for birds, insects. They help slow or reduce stormwater runoff. It decreases energy costs. It increases the photosynthetic potential of urban landscapes. So imagine that rippling effect, right, in downtown Vancouver. From soil health to animal health in this environment. So think about the number of birds, bees, other pollinators visiting this large space. They have another site in the city where they are finding geese nesting on their green roofs, which is really cool. And this is present day Vancouver House. I believe they had another treatment or two from 2021. So what the team does is they would call me up, request for the biological inoculants, and then they come and pick it up, and then they apply the treatments themselves. So here's another image of that same green roof. Now, we didn't do a post biological analysis. The clients were happy. They didn't think it was necessary. So yeah, it's been a really cool thing to see. So the next case study that I want to talk about is Little Dog Farm. We're actually having a workshop, a 3-day intensive workshop in Creston this coming October with these guys, and Ian is gonna be doing in the field demonstration of his equipment and the treatments. We're gonna be building compost, and I'm gonna be there presenting theory in Creston. So if anyone in that area is here, feel free to check out the links. Hopefully I can share them later on with the group. So these are my farmer collaborators, Kathy and Ian Finley. Their career in regenerative farming started back in 2013. So they basically moved from a 5-acre lot to a 60-acre parcel. And yeah, they've been busy reestablishing their business since 2020 in Creston. So just as a reference, these are the two areas on their farm that we had to remediate. This is the North Orchard. This is the South Orchard. They have about 60 acres of productive land, and the rest they've left it native and wild. So they're not touching that area at all, allowing the native plants to flourish. So one of the first steps that Ian took to try and remediate the soil is to sow diverse cover crops. So he basically had a cocktail of wildflowers, grasses, and legumes. The germination was spotty at best. So he contacted me. We had our first conversation in 2020. And to summarize it, cover seeds barely germinated, poor organic matter levels. The baseline values were way below 5%. He also dug trial holes in the fields and found that there's very little soil life in his trial holes. He also wants to produce compost and apply extracts and teas as his main inputs, which meant he needed to have proper equipment. And he wants to do soil testing for the initial 5 years until the orchards are established and flourishing. So their journey basically, they came from the 5-acre parcel where they were mostly growing grass-finished beef. They had intensive vegetable production. In this on this property, they have an orchard and they want to grow apples and all these different types of fruit trees for cider production. So it's a completely different type of farming. So this was my initial visit in April 2021. I was so anxious when I saw when I saw the state of the soil. It was unbelievably bare and barren. I was nervous for them. I was like, you guys are crazy. I don't know what you're doing." But in any case, here's a different section of the farm. You can see how they planted vegetables a year before, and these carrots did they didn't even germinate over winter, which is indicative of the absence of biology. And given the intensive soil damage from past practices, so it was a hay field from the previous owners. So intensive tilling, you can actually cause this damage with intensive tillage over time. There was we had no information about fertilizers or anything like that, any chemical inputs that we know of. So we all think that it could just be intensive tillage that caused this issue. And we decided, hey, why not till the soil again, just so that we can get some water in there. And I like to call this restorative disturbance. This was done in May of 2021. And as you know, one of the best tools to have on hand to accelerate restoration is by teaming with the microbes. So Ian set out to build compost. This was his initial setup, and each of these cylinders hold about a cubic yard of material. We started with roughly 4 cubic yards for 25 acres. This was going to be his spring and fall treatment. And the reason for choosing a small volume to begin with is so that he can get a sense of how to properly manage his compost resources available to him locally. So I put together a recipe based on what he can find around him and the farmers that he can connect with and what resources they have that he can acquire. Unfortunately, out of the 4 piles, we were only able to use 2 piles. The other two were unsuccessful. So we really only had roughly 2 cubic yards for 25 acres. Ian didn't think that this was going to work. And these piles are very bacterial dominated, and we are trying to grow fruit trees, which requires a healthy fungal population. And so you need to promote the fungal biomass, but this is also I guess the question is, can we still use the compost for liquid bioblends, even if the fruit trees that he's growing require fungal biomass? Can we still use a bacterial dominated compost as part of his extract and tea treatment? And I said, yeah, absolutely. Why not? This is what they had to fix to begin with. Of predatory organisms, and we want to take advantage of those bacterial feeding organisms, which can then they're going to feed on the bacteria, which is going to force the bacterial communities to restructure the soil. So that was kind of the intention um, behind why we could still use these compost piles. And of course, we can't it's critical to also combine cover cropping at the same time. So we can't just use extracts without having some kind of organic matter in the soil. And it was also in 2021 when we had the heat wave here in BC. We weren't able to treat the fields until October of that year. So his piles were sitting there waiting to be used. His microbes were just managed with Ian is just making sure that he mists his compost piles, keeping the microbes active and alive. So in October of that year, I revisited the farm and trained Ian on how to make his own extracts and teas using the compost piles that he assembled. And our rate of application was roughly 95 liters per acre. This might be too concentrated for some folks, but the soil that we were working with was really poor. So we wanted to uh, have a high concentration as much as possible. This is the North Orchard section of the farm from the year before, and this is what it looked like in May 2022. This is the same field a few months later. At this point, the fields only had 3 treatments, and the germination of his cover crop seeds finally it happened. So he was really happy to see all of that money that he poured into buying the wildflowers, the grasses, the
Oh, Joe, looks like your audio cut out. Anybody else get that? Brian, can you?
I'm not hearing her.
I
Yeah.
couldn't hear either.
when
Yeah, we had a
when
couple
All right,
cutouts.
now you're good.
when did I cut out?
Oh, like
Oh,
When
kind
you
of
first flip this slide.
oh,
yeah.
okay. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. So
All
I'm
good.
still good then?
Yeah, you're still good.
Yeah.
Cool. Sweet. So this is the different the other section of the farm, the South Orchard. Kathy was noticing that there hadn't been any rain that year, but there was still moisture in the soil. And then I came back again a couple of years later just to check out how the farm is doing. And we then tested his spray, his rig, making sure that he's able to do foliar treatments. So whether or not his equipment had to be configured, whether or not he had to get new parts, because he's just been spraying the soil for 2 years. He hasn't planted any. I believe spring of 2023, he planted, I think, a quarter of his trees in the South Orchard, and he needed to make sure that he's able to apply foliar treatments on his baby trees. So that's why I came back and tested his inoculants, making sure that I'm actually seeing organisms coming out of the sprayer. And this is his new compost pile. What do you call it? Mesh. I don't even know what to call this thing. It's pretty heavy duty. So 3 treatments later in the South Orchard, this is what they sent me, visible fungal growth above ground. These are puffballs, edible mushrooms. They had some that evening and they dehydrated the rest. The color of the soil also changed. Also am seeing a lot of different types of plants starting to show up in the South Orchard, which was really nice to see. And then just over 2 years' time, this is what we get from Moonscape to this thriving orchard. But we're not done yet. We are still monitoring the soil. He's still sending his compost samples, his soil samples, and we're seeing where we can adjust his inputs, how we can adjust his inputs, what his recipe looks like, all of these things. Um, Here's another before photo. This is the South Orchard, and this is the after photo. So this was this year actually, just a month ago. So it's really cool. The trees are still babies. They haven't produced yet. So it's gonna be a couple more years before they actually become more productive. But it's nice to see more residue in the soil and different cover crops showing up. And then finally, the last project, this is going to be really quick. I'd like to share is with the City of Vancouver's Green Infrastructure team. The team is, so I do treatments for the City of Vancouver. The Green Infrastructure Department, they're responsible for implementing what are called bioretention practices. Manage rainwater where it falls. We get a lot of rain here on the coast. Rather than letting it rush untreated into storm drains and waterways. So bioretention practices, it includes bioswales, rain gardens, bioretention cells, which is the type of bioretention that I work with. So essentially, they are engineered depressions, and it's layered with rock, engineered soils, and mostly native vegetation, hardy vegetation that are capable of withstanding drought and intense rainfall. So when rainwater flows into these systems, it temporarily pools and then filters through the soil. And the idea is along the way, pollutants are broken down or absorbed by plants, or they are denatured, or they're decomposed by microbes. So the treated water, um, again, it's either pulled up by plants, it evaporates, or it gets filtered into the ground and conveyed through a drain into local aquatic systems. So as part of this project, I provide different types of extracts or teas. They have different sites all over the city, and my role is to just go in there, make sure that the thing with these systems is that these substrates are made of 70 to 75% sand. So you can just imagine how hard it would be for these plants to thrive, especially in the summer when they're not irrigated. And so again, my role is to just make sure that the team isn't constantly replacing plants because it can get really expensive for the city as well. Unfortunately, that substrate is standard for landscapes or these systems anyway. Um, what else was I gonna say? Oh yeah, last thing I want to add is when you're working in this profession, for me anyway, my vision wasn't just to stop at agriculture and just work with farmers. When you're working with soil, there are all these different industries that you can infiltrate. I work with municipalities, I work with agriculture, farmers, and nonprofit organizations that support farmers. I also work for landscape architecture firm, design firms, the city, municipalities, homesteaders, gardeners. So there are all these different avenues that you can explore. Anyone that works with soil, anyone that works with plants, you can basically be a part of. And finally, I just want to share a quick quote. When you're doing the right thing for the earth, she gives you great company. And with that, thank you, everyone. I'm going to leave it here. Thanks, Riley.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that was so cool. You converted a moonscape into a beautiful, luscious orchard. I mean, so many interesting case studies and unique biomes you touched. It's really fantastic to see. I mean, yeah, I'm very impressed by your work, your understanding of soil biology, and it's so great seeing this, your work percolate out there and, seeing the impact you're having in BC and other places. So appreciate your work and I appreciate knowing you. And for folks who want to work with Joe, you can I'll send the link, but she has a business Root Shoot Soils, and she has also workshops coming up that you could join. And of course, if you're in BC, oh my gosh, she is the person to work with if you want to restore soils. I'm going to pop her website in the chat, and then we will move to Adam. Shoot soils. Um, Here, Brian, maybe, Joe, do you mind like ending the screen share real fast?
Oh, yeah, for
No
sure.
worries.
Let me just make sure. Oh, yes,
That was
done.
also a cool cage. Like normally we're anti-cage. The Compost Academy is
Oh, yeah.
cage free, but that cage looked really cool. That was a very
It's
space
pretty
age
heavy duty.
cage.
Ian
Yeah.
upgraded his cage. Yeah, yeah.
In the fancy second cage, I was like, he took care of all
Hmm.
the sharp edges with that baby.
Oh yeah, out there sanded it down.
Sweet. So Brian, how about you give Adam an intro and then we'll
Sure.
go up there.
So Adam, I think we've known each other now for almost 5 years, 4 to 5 years in that sense, probably in that space. But Adam is a fount of knowledge, and really, I almost think Adam, you're kind of like the soil food web philosopher as well. I think you kind of bridge the whole philosophy and science and kind of that intersection in between. Adam and I have had great conversations over the year. He's a wonderful mycologist. He's the mycorrhizae fungi guy. I've always kind of relied upon him for advice in that space as well. And really, I think Adam is taking on that role of educator and again philosopher, and I'm really excited to hear what he has to say. So, Adam, take it away.
Thank you, Brian. So great to be here with all of you today. And Joe, you and I are going to have to catch up on the Philippines because I lived there for 7 years outside of Manila. So, um, when Brian asked me on to this webinar, I said, well, I got to come up with a little bit of a title here, and these two words, sauntering and tinkering, really kind of exemplify the life that I've lived, and I hope you'll see that here in the presentation, including even my photograph taken a few other days where I found some little bees in my first pumpkin that I've ever tried to grow here, giving me a little pollination service. So you can catch up with me, hollowbionthub.com. We're also on social medias. I try to put out about 20 Substack articles a year. We have a community Slack channel, so please reach out after this if anything seems interesting to you. Um, the first half of this talk, I'm gonna really talk about, my story here, as Brian asked me to, and my love story in agriculture, agroecology really starts in New Zealand. About 17 years ago, I went over there because I didn't know what else to do with my life when I was 25. And I experienced these diverse landscapes and met a lot of amazing people. I backpacked around the North and South Island for about 3 months. And one of my favorite farms actually had Icelandic horses. They're just big grass puppies. Very, very sweet. But I learned from a number of the farmers that I worked with because I was doing volunteer work on organic farms, that if I wanted to pursue a career shift, I should focus on soils. And so I just learned right then and there that soils are the neatest. And came back to the US. Within a year, I was at Oklahoma State University in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Go Pokes! And got two of my graduate degrees from that institution. In fact, my first Master's of Agriculture was very interdisciplinary, not science focused, not research focused. And then I took this restoration ecology class with Dr. Gail Wilson. And she was a mycorrhizal ecologist and just got me really excited. I kind of leaned on her as a mentor even towards the end of my master's. And then I was looking at a different institution, and she said, "No, you should stay here. I've got space in my lab. I've got a project with the USDA assessing grain sorghum and trying to go all the way from what's happening below ground with the mycorrhizal fungi to the grain quality." So I stayed there with her. In fact, not only did I stay another 4 years and complete my PhD, I stayed another four after that as a postdoc and got additional funding. That's a photo of Gail and one of my buddies, Eric, and I in Botswana. So I got a chance to really go to some neat places as part of her lab and that research. And I spent a ton of time in tallgrass prairies as well, because that was the focus of Gail's lab. And I took this photograph of some bison at the Kanza Prairie Biological Station in the Flint Hills of Kansas. At one time, these systems, which are not typically fertilized, maybe they were burnt a little bit by some of the indigenous communities there, but they very mildly managed by humans. They supported 40 to 60 million bison historically. So there was an amazing capacity of these living soils to meet the needs of those organisms. And this is one of the reasons why arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, which I often call AM fungi, you can find blogs and things that I've written about them because I really like them. They relate to the majority of plants in the tallgrass prairie. They confer a huge benefit. So I've given you a link to a summary paper there, or the information to get to a summary paper about all these benefits: pathogen protection, stress tolerance, nutrition access, water access, right? Plant roots have a limited amount of soil that they touch, but by connecting with these mycorrhizal fungi, they can reach deeper into the soil systems. And this picture here, I always love to put up to remind myself, because people hear mycorrhizal fungi and there's different kinds, and a lot of times they think they reproduce by making a mushroom or a fruiting body. These guys, who relate to about 80% of the plants on Earth, they don't make mushrooms, right? And they actually will not grow in a compost pile or expand their population under normal circumstances. They need host plants, and they get their food from the host plant, and they make spores in the soil. So this shows you how they crowd around the root system and produce the seeds of the next generation of AM fungi. So that's just a quick science lesson there. This paper was one of the last that I produced when I was still in academia. And this is my plant, sorghum bicolor, my favorite one. Classic big plant, little plant. The only difference between the back row and the front row, as we grew them, is the same cultivar in the same greenhouse for the same amount of time, but we repressed the AM fungi here. So they had so much less of that nutrient symbiosis, right? That partnership that was going on there. And that explains why they can grow about 600% more when they have their fungal partners. What this paper did, it was kind of one of the bigger questions that I kept going back to and asking when I had a research career is, have we bred some of our modern crops, right, selective breeding, where they're actually not as cooperative with those microbes? And this peer reviewer that forced me to rewrite part of this paper said, you've got to bring in the holobiont concept, which is so it's the first time I really, really did a deep dive on holobionts, which I will explain later. But I asked the question in this figure, in this paper, are we breeding plants or are we breeding plants and a community of other biological organisms? They might be in different contexts, they might be managed different ways. If we separate the plant or the animal, by the way, and don't consider its partner organisms, then we maybe have bred it in the wrong direction. It is really it's not a question I've asked uniquely. A lot of people are asking that. The other big thing that happened in this time frame, my last couple years in Stillwater, Oklahoma, is I joined an extension education program at Oklahoma Ag Leadership, and I really got to sit back and spend 3 days a month for a couple of years, as well as a trip to DC, as well as a trip to Chile and South America, with a bunch of production ag folks, agribusiness folks, large scale cotton farming, cattle, wheat. There was other nerds like me that kind of came from an academic side, but it was very eye-opening to see the way that production agriculture, especially conventional, works. And so that has really affected my perspective. By the way, that's a field of sorghum in the panhandle of Oklahoma. And it's quite short, so I'm actually like not standing up in that photograph, but I made one of my friends take a picture of me lovingly looking at one of my favorite plants. The next 3 years after I kind of left Oklahoma, I moved first to Oregon, and then now I'm here in Idaho. My perspectives kept accumulating, like organic matter accumulates in a system. I worked with Dr. Ingham and several other rock stars out there in the soils world. It's where Brian and I met as well. And I really kind of kept adding to my mycorrhizal nerd excitement. I kept adding other organisms and expanding my understanding of the biological community, which has led me to this place where I've launched Holiant Hub because I want the holistic community of organisms to be part of our discussion in every case. So this is the big lesson that I took away from working with Elaine for so long. She's not the only person who has worked with this paradigm over time, but I loved the way that she explained, a lot of practices either enhance the living qualities of soil as an ecosystem, as habitat for microorganisms, or it turns it into dead dirt. And we can go back and forth between those categories. There's a big gradient. But that's just worth mentioning here because you can see it. Typical agricultural management, probably what 90 something percent of the soils on planet Earth are managed in, not just agricultural, in people's backyards, in landscapes that are done for parks and stuff, really good at making dead dirt. Really good at it. This is a conservation district photograph. I know that the dead dirt column here was like a tilled every year and probably treated with a lot of fungicides and things, versus what I would call ecological management, right, where you put that life in soil at a central place in your design, and it's so much more stable and resilient, and it has cohesion. You can put a chunk of that soil, real living soil, in water, and it won't fall apart there, right? So I need to keep moving here. I think Brian, how much time do I have left?
Oh, I'd say, Adam, another 10, 15 minutes. It'd be good.
Yeah, you're
Perfect.
good.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I'm halfway through, so
Okay, cool.
I wanted
Yeah, yeah.
to transition to some things that I've been doing recently. A couple years ago, it was not the first time, but it was one of the most memorable. I got to go work with some groups that primarily serve cotton farmers in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. And this is one of my big, for several years now, this has been one of my big ties back to production agriculture systems. So right here, we're on the edge of a cotton field in Tanzania and receiving a training about the production of pit-based biochars, which biochar is a big subject. It's controversial. it's worth a whole seminar. Um, but it was a very interesting experience. And the human beings in this photograph serve probably 2 million small scale farmers across a dozen countries in sub-Saharan Africa, right? They're purchasing cotton from them, they're providing services and inputs to them. And so it's a really exciting thing to go into this group and sort of train the trainers to have that soil vision, you could call it, right? That understanding of the ecological world around us. I've been able to go to India, Benin, Tanzania, Cote d'Ivoire, Hamburg, Germany recently, to have these conversations. And I should tell a story about these farmers that are touching my beard. I don't speak Swahili. This was out in rural Tanzania. I mean, I watch Lion King a bunch, so I speak a few words of Swahili. But uh, we had to get a translator because these four farmers in the area were like, "We have to take our picture with you." Okay, that's fine. And it was just because of my beard. And actually there was one guy that we took a picture with him, and then through the translator I said, okay, you have to step back, and only people with beards get to be in this photo, which got a little bit of a giggle from everyone. But it was just a great time. I was very inspired by this community. I got horribly sunburnt that day, and it was totally worth it. Um, so yeah, Tanzania, uh, high in my memory. I got to go afterwards on safari, all of that stuff. But Benin was amazing this year. I'm gonna write what I call a hub note or a Substack note about my experiences in Benin and how inspiring they were. The other side of what I do is I'm constantly tinkering in this little strip of my backyard. You can probably see in the first photo there that the house casts a big shadow on it. But there is a time of the year, the growing season, where this small strip of yard actually gets enough sun to grow vegetables. And so I'm working with hugelkultur and other things. These pumpkins and squash in the one photo are growing on a passive compost pile because I was like, what the heck? Let's just try to plant some more plants in here, even while things are kind of composting in there slowly. So I would really like to see millions of new participants in backyard gardening and landscaping and restoration, because I think one of the only way we need to get to the like land managers who are managing big chunks of agricultural land. Sure, we have to. Uh, there's huge water pollution issues, climate change issues that are connected to how agriculture is being done writ large. I also think humans need to have relationships with holobionts, with plants, with microorganisms. I think backyard composting has changed who I am as a human being for the better. And so that's really, I'm constantly trying to think of ways that I could reach in and say, you've never grown a plant before, let me help you, right? And by the way, it's not just a plant, it's this microbiome, and let's get that going for you. So I'm tinkering all the time with that. I do a lot of active composting, thermal composting, very similar. Sorry that there's a cage in that. I do use cages some. You guys are going to have to teach me more about going cage free. Uh, and here's Riley, and you'd think that she's being super helpful with this. She was actually wanting to steal the cracked corn and nibble on that when I was building this pile. But you know, the soil food web is a continual thought process in this whole thing. Why do I make compost? Because I want a diverse local set of microorganisms. Everybody that could benefit my plants and the soil structure and all. And I actually feed anything that comes out of my thermal piles while it's maturing. I put compost worms in there too, and it looks amazing under a microscope. It smells amazing. I don't even know if after worms have been at it, you should call it compost anymore. I think it's worm gold at that point, right? So I tinker around with all kinds of bioamendment styles, um, active and passive systems. I'm going to build a real Johnson Sioux compost pile for the first time just because of the timing. It'll work better for me to have more space to compost in the fall. This spring, I built an 80 bucket thermal pile. That's like 1,600 liters, and it was way too much. And I wish it had been half that size. But I do aerobic and anaerobic stuff. I don't see anaerobes as the enemy. I think that there's some that we want to chase out of our system a little bit. But like, for example, I've cultured lactic acid bacteria and I'm making what's biofermented plant-based fertilizer, right? With leftover grains and grass clippings and stuff. I'm interested in both biostimulating because I think I have a lot of things living there. I dig a hole, I have 5 worms in it in my garden now, but I'm trying to stimulate them constantly by adding some products as well as re-inoculating the system because it's hot and dry out there. This is what I'm proudest of. I have really, really great tomatoes this year. I've got 12 cherry tomatoes and they're coming on wonderfully. And then I'm also growing cotton, which is not something you can grow in Idaho, really. We have cold nights, but I got this window. They're growing all right, and I'm gonna have to. I planted them in pots so I can pull them inside and put them under LEDs to finish making me some cotton flowers sometime in September, October. I just thought I should know more about the plant if I'm going to work with cotton farmers at all. Yeah. So last few slides. If I sense that that's okay. Nobody's looking mad at me. I want to mention that my personal perspective through that whole experience and the tinkering and the education stuff is I'm very, very into an integrative mindset. I think rules and categories can be a big problem. And so as I play with the term ecological, land, soil, plant, water, animal management, it's to me about utilizing a huge menu of practical strategies. And some might fit the category of traditionally what we call the regenerative principles, and some might not. Or I might say that's fine to do once, or that's fine to do a couple times if you watch out for this stuff and mitigate the damage, right? And that's because I put holobiont at the center of everything, not the method, right? The method gets me to a place where I manage the holobiont more effectively. So what is a holobiont? I've used the term a bunch without defining it. I'm one. You're one. This little lizard is a holobiont. The stick, the plant that grew the stick that he's on, this is in the slopes of Kilimanjaro, by the way, from a couple of years ago. That was a holobiont, that plant. It's when you have a host organism, usually a larger multi-celled organism, and it's like the scaffolding or the structure, and then all these other critters are living inside of it and on it and around it and with it, right? And so medical science is really catching up to how important the human gut microbiome is, right? All those other organisms. This is, easily you could call it hosts plus their microbiomes are holobionts. But I like the term, I like to think about holistic holobiont, right? It's interconnected, it's complex. And if I could rework this quote from the Jungle Book, for the strength of the host is the microbiome, and the strength of the microbiome is the host. I think it is a problem when people try to argue, is it plants or is it microbes? Because it's both. It's all together. It's the holobiont. We can't split them up. So this just briefly goes over what some of those could be. I would consider pollinators part of the holobiont community of a tomato plant because they actually cross microbiomes a little bit when they visit. The bacteria, the protozoa, the microfauna, the fungi, inside the plant, around all of its above ground and below ground tissues, there's these rich microbiomes. Ideally, that's how they evolved. That's the context that they need to achieve. Or else we're just managing the tomato plant and we have to juice it up with a bunch of chemicals and stuff to keep it alive. So why does all that matter? If we can achieve active allies, right? All the microorganisms and such, and hosts that can cooperate with the allies. Then we really just have to step in and keep the conditions of the environment supportive. They'll assemble and make a thriving holobiont. We'll get resource use efficiencies, right? Less water, less fertilizers. We'll get pest and disease suppression. Um, Yield and quality can actually increase, right, in an area. I live in a high desert. That land would be dried out and dead, except it's full of holobionts. And I do have to add a lot of water to keep them thriving, but they're bringing this intrinsic resilience to the system. So these are the kinds of little guys I see in my worm compost, and I'm really excited. They're bioindicators that that environment is good, water, air, food, habitat, homes for the organisms. These things tell me I'm on the right track, and I'm really not a quantification guy. I don't like to try to turn what I assess on the microscope into data. I have a lot of issues with that. But I am excited when I see nematodes and tardigrades and fungal strands and all in abundance and diversity of those things, because it tells me that we're on the right track, that one of my essential workforces is there. And yeah, that's really where we go with that. This is a picture I took this morning of a part of my yard. Very challenging because of the sunlight. A lot of the plants don't get quite enough, or they don't get it at the right time of day. But I have turned it from the surface of Mars into this by just adding organic matter, adding microorganisms from my worm bin, seeding in plants. I've got buckwheat as a nice little nurse crop. Increasingly, I've got sorghum back there for summertime. Um, the holobionts have reassembled, and they're transforming this space, as small as it is, into something a lot more fun to look at than what it was. So I'll end there, and I guess this back to you.
Adam, awesome presentation as always. Fantastic. I'd love to
Wondrous.
hear your journey too. I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah,
And
well,
I'm super impressed about your garden, man. That's it's really coming along.
Especially for such lack of light.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know
right.
I
the
complain about
struggle.
it all the time.
Yeah, me too. If we were together, we'd be both whining about our sun.
Did you like that was a really cool like state picture of it is in the present state. Did you ever snap a before picture?
I do have some of those, and I'm going to put
Ah,
together maybe like a year one, year two, year three
Perfect.
kind of
nice.
case study with it. I mean, it's only like a meter by 3 meters or something. It's not like some huge area, but it's been really fun to work with, and just to see that it's again that whole control versus influence. Sometimes I'm putting the wrong thing there, and it's telling me like I don't want to be here actually. And then I'm like, fine, I'll dig you up and put you somewhere else.
Well, and that's, I find a lot of people just talking with people about, gardening, and so much of the knowledge about how to do a victory garden or your home gardening kind of stuff has kind of disappeared. And there's a fear around, I just don't think I could grow, my vegetables or, my tomato plants and things like that. I think just demystifying some of that fear for people and showing, yeah, you can take a small little piece of land and you can actually produce a good amount of food in that small little piece of land. And it wasn't too difficult once you start to understand those systems. So yeah, I love it. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Well,
Oh, Joe has a hand raised, actually, I
oh
think.
yeah, I think we'll get to Joe's question first. It's panelist privilege. Panelist privilege. We'll let her chat, and then I've got a little opportunity I want to share everyone about Compost Academy, and then we'll get to all the juicy Q&As after there. So yeah, Joe, what question did you have to ask?
Oh, yeah. I can wait until the question period. It's okay. Oh,
You're
No,
you're
muted.
muted.
oh yes, I was like, let's do it right now.
Okay. All right. So this question is for Adam. Going back to the research and your the selective breeding program, with the plants these days that we have and how breeding programs usually focus on high yields, what are the consequences of that type of practice when it comes to mycorrhizal colonization?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So, the first chapter of my dissertation, which we did publish, kind of had the dream publication with it. I like submitted it and went away on a trip to celebrate graduating and came back and had comments and then got them in, and it was published in 2 months. And my PhD advisor was like, "This is spoiled, Joe." My next paper took a year and a half to publish, so but that in that paper we actually found we assessed the root colonization, which was not a perfect assessment, and I actually don't do it anymore. But stared at a microscope a lot in grad school, got a lot of help from other people to quantify the colonization of the root, we call it, the area covered by mycorrhizae. And in some of the landrace sorghums, the ones like um, from their ancestral homes, or just maybe bred, but bred very open pollinated kind of style, they would be like 60% covered with mycorrhizal fungi if we assess the roots. And then the modern hybrid ones that had been through all of that program stuff and kind of done for that context would be like 20%. So that's significant, thankfully. And then we also saw that in grain quality, that I had so much more zinc and calcium and magnesium and phosphorus and stuff in the actual grains that were produced, and often much more grain produced, even in low fertilization settings. But it's like we're kind of making like a thoroughbred racehorse that needs perfect context for its or a high performance athlete, right? And I need this kind of protein and this kind of exactly this regime. And we haven't really focused on making very thrifty and cooperative crops and animals for a long time.
I think that speaks to seed saving of a lot of these, older varieties that are not part of the modern agricultural realm, and trying to get those put back into the production. Um, so awesome.
Hmm. Yeah, you guys have such a wealth and depth of knowledge. I love it. Love having Bill on. This, I mean, some of us we're kind of like starting, we're midway, but just seeing like how far you guys dive deep into the knowledge of the soil biome and all their knowledge of the organisms and holistic interactions. It's so fantastic to see. Um, I know. We could go on a science webinar for hours, and I'm sure, like with the land, people would be like, "Yeah, I need more. It's 3 hours. I need 4 hours. I need 5 hours." But maybe we'll move on to some good questions. But really quick, I know some of you folks may have seen this before, but I wanted to share something about what we're doing with the Compost Academy. Can you guys see this full screen?
Good.
Look good. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, so I wanted to give you guys an opportunity. We have this online program with uh, Keisha, Casey, Brian, and I called Compost Academy. It's for in-depth training for helping you create really high value soil amendments and biological compost. So really what we want to do is take, inspiration and turn it into action. Whether you're a composter, a farmer, whether you want to be a soil consultant, we want to really help you get the skills so that you feel really confident and competent creating biological compost that can actually have a really big impact on the landscape. So here's an example, like Joe and Adam shared their examples. This is examples of Keisha and Casey in Southern California, like turning these post-fire moonscapes back into healthy, functioning ecosystems. And it was really good. We're making videos about all of these, but seeing these in person is fantastic because you see the abundance of wildlife, native plants, just the feeling of peace, the verdance of the landscape. And this is all thanks to the application of catalyst compost and biological compost extracts on these landscapes. It's phenomenal seeing the ecosystem take going from ash and fire back to a stable landscape, stable ecosystems, thanks to the introduction of soil biology. And we've got a really cool, hopefully we'll get I think on next week we've got a whole story about this vineyard that we're expanding them on. About this is Brian's client helped a vineyard who is thriving with his grape orchard thanks to the application of compost extracts and compost. And even in the hot, really intense urban landscapes where it's just concrete, you can do an amazing conversion using applications of compost extract and by making, like learning how to make very biodiverse and compost. So, what this Compost Academy is all about, we most of all just don't want you to do this by your own. We want to give you a community, camaraderie, coaching, and a lot of action so that you actually feel like you're leveling up and you know how to make compost in the right way and actually cut your learning curve so you're not spending hundreds of hours experimenting on a process which may not actually lead you anywhere. And what it's about learning about composting techniques, thermophilic, vermicomposting, static. It's about learning how to use biological extracts and teas, how to brew it, scale it, the techniques and technology, microscopy. It's an introduction about that, how to replace toxic, expensive chemicals and inputs with compost. And there's expanded case studies for landscapes, growers, and composters. Of course, practical biology lessons. We don't want to get stuck in theory, though it's great to have an overview of it. And of course, we want to show you the different scales of composting that are possible. So a bit about what's in it. There's self-paced video lessons. There's 28 plus lessons. These are going to keep getting expanded. We have a 13-week group coaching program coming up on July 31st. We have a really awesome online community along with our in-person compost academies. We have a microscope library. We've got really awesome action challenges that will force you to level up and keep you accountable. And of course, you get discounts to future retreats and workshops, and you get access to intensives like the large-scale composting one that we got coming up in October. So all in all, you get access to all these things, self-paced course, soil mentorship program, soil circle, soil explorers group, and altogether together it's $1,300 and this is available till August 1st. And though we did have an early bird, you can still sign up for it. It's a really awesome value here. A lot of these programs cost thousands, but we're offering it for $1,300. You get lifetime access, self-paced trainings. You gave me the recordings from previous soul mentorship groups, so that's cool. And you get access to bonus trainings like this. And it's a really good value. I'd say it's worth about 5,000, but we're getting it to you for 1,300. So if you want to enroll, that's available right now. Just go to Compost Academy and you could just sign up right there. So I'll post that link, but let's get to some Q&A. All right. Well, we got some good questions here, so let's get rocking. So Miguel says, has anyone ever encountered an invasive or any project you worked on with a worm, insect, or plant?
All the time.
Like get away from invasives on our
Yeah.
project.
Yeah, most of the time we're just coming into a land of invasives, it's just invasive
Totally.
mustard or castor or things like that. I'm trying to think of a scenario where we've had like invasive like animal or invasive insect or something like that. I can't really
Do
think
y'all
of.
have those Asian jumping worms?
We
I've
don't,
never
but
dealt with them. I've never seen one. I've never dealt with one,
Mhm.
so I don't know.
Those
People
are
in the
really tough.
Philippines.
it
Sorry.
was
Are
a
are those the problematic jumping worms, or is there like multiple like species of jumping worms that are?
Well, if you go back to our webinar from
I
the
know, I
beginning of
need
this
to
promotional
watch.
series, Raleigh, you can see what Matthew Gates has to say. Actually, we were really surprised to hear that the jumping worm is low on the list of the bad guy worms. Honestly, Adam, we found, I hate even saying this, but the worms that we see in the garden where we go, oh my gosh, we have worms. There's 3 or 4 in every scoop. They're much higher on the list for devastation and destruction than the Asian jumping worm. So there's a lot to dig into with invasive species and a lot of opinions out there about what to do, how to deal with them, whether they're bad. Should we destroy all habitat to get rid of these jumping worms?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
invasive species are here to stay. I mean, just a part of our global nature, the ability to move microorganisms or organisms around within hours from one region to the next. it's going to be super hard to control. And it's really hard, I think, for environments to adapt because normally the adaptation would be kind of slow and take some time. Here, I think in our global nature, it's a problem that we have to try to address. There's no good answer, to be honest with you. We struggle with this all the time, right? Should it be native species only, or what's really native? I mean, I don't know. It's a hard question to, I think, tackle.
We certainly do our best. We keep talking about it, don't we?
We do.
But we don't know yet. Let's keep going.
I did just promise some people on my Substack that in the next 3 months I'm going to try to put out a my strongest case for like a stricter bioregionalist perspective. I'm a big fan of looking at those evolutionary boundaries and saying even if the species were the same, I want the local population with its local genetics that is from the most natural area I can find. But everything is whatever. Like the tomatoes I'm growing in my garden are from Peru
Right.
originally.
Right.
So
Well, I think especially when you talk about invasive pests and invasive like weedy species, things like that, really, I think if you get to good management practices, you have the ability to start to control those things. Like in your graphic that you talked about, Adam, about, having the microorganism community, the host community, but then it's the management part of it too. That's the piece of it that we have some control or context over. So, we want to grow healthy, vigorous plants so they have the ability to suppress or to resist some of those species invasives that are going to attack your plants. That's really kind of, I think, the focus that we kind of put our headspace into, not preventing any invasive species getting into that land because that's almost sometimes an impossible task.
Yeah, we have had a lot of experience in working with, we have all kinds of different plant-eating species coming in and just working on the actual ecosystem that the roots are planted in that, has shown over and over and over again to be helpful. Plants are often really resilient at pushing off these different, especially boring. I'm thinking of the boring beetles right now is what's really on my head, on my mind. They're not supposed to really have any predators here in North America yet. Fungi just adore them, and you can see that when you look at their skeletons and they have mushrooms growing out of their heads. So um, a lot of times the typical word we hear on the street that there's nothing we can do except for poison and destroy, they just haven't looked at microbes yet. So this work is exciting for that reason. At least you get surprised sometimes.
Ooh, I like this. Oh, Elise has her hand raised, so I'm gonna unmute her. So let's go to Elise. Hello, hello. She's muted. We're gonna let her unmute herself, and then she can talk. Elise, if you can unmute your microphone, we'll let you chat. We'll leave that going. If we hear your voice, we'll let you answer ask that
Oh, there you go.
question. But oh,
There you
there
go.
we go. Hello, hello. Elise, are you there? Oh, almost. Well, if we hear, we'll know. But why don't we get to, I guess, quick question from Ramanta to Adam. Adam, what are you using the wood chip for? Oh, there, never mind. There's Elise. Hey, hey, we can hear you.
Um, I don't have really a question, but I'm in agricultural study, and I plan to build a compost station to make bio compost biocomplet, like the Dr. Ingham in Morocco. Um, uh, I don't know really why I have the speak now. Maybe I have do something I don't know very well Zoom, but thank you of all of you for your speaks.
No worries. Well,
Thank
I
you.
hope you make
No
an
worries.
amazing hub in Morocco.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's really good compost is needed there and everywhere else.
So was the Adam question?
So yeah, question to Adam was, what are you using the wood chips for?
Mm, yeah, so I got myself into something with those wood chips because we had some guys come by to do a little tree trimming in the neighborhood, and I was like, can I have your wood chips? And they gave me so many. I'm still trying to figure out what to do with all of them, but part of my garden is actually like a concrete pad. And so I have, as many wood chips as I can pile up down there where I'm actually growing cucumber and some things in containers to try to reduce the heat accumulation of just the sun hitting that concrete. And then I also use them in walkways and I compost a lot with wood chips. Like usually around half of my compost piles are going to be woody material. Um, Probably the most unique thing I've done with them is we had this old dog kennel in the side yard there, like with a chain link fence, right, for a big dog. We've never used it, but it came with the house. And I actually built a like almost meter thick wood chip wall on one side of it, and then I pile up my maturing compost on the other side of the wood chip wall to reduce moisture loss because I'm in a hot, dry environment. And I'll even go out there and water the wood chips and stuff to try to like just keep the moisture in there. I have to use straw and tarps and all kinds of things to just change the moisture evaporative like rate of that maturing compost, or it would dry out in 2 days. It would be ridiculous. So.
Yeah.
Smart.
All right.
That's thinking.
Question from Anonymous. Whoa, who could that be? Whoa. Anyway, are there any signifiers, a chemical, a nutrient, an animal that you want to see at an early phase in your project, but you want it gone at the end? It's an interesting one. Like maybe like that shows early succession or like shows different stages like succession. Yeah, it's
Well,
interesting.
I
it
mean,
leads
these,
right into the invasive species, right? Let's see, if you were only to see rats at your compost lot in the beginning, it would be a good thing to see, eagles and turkey and coyotes later.
we see, we talk a lot about transition. You transition a landscape, right? You're kind of building that ecosystem, and things will appear early in the transition, and then they will not appear later in the transition because it's just not the right ecological niche for them to grow. So we definitely do want to see that kind of progression as we're changing that ecosystem. Like if I took I'll use my yard as an example. When I bought this place 3 years ago, blank slate, horrible soil, compacted sand, nothing was growing on it but early weedy species. Now we've gone through that transition, and those early weedy species are moving away from germinating. They're just not even germinating anymore because the conditions are no longer fit for that type of purpose. And so seeing that transition is help. But now other things are coming in. In fact, more insects are coming in. I'm seeing spiders. Now the birds are coming in. And now there's a whole progression of these other indicators to me that, yes, the ecosystem is moving to where I want it to be, which is a food forest. It's going to be, production multi-species, trees and shrubs and berries and herbaceous plants is where I'm, trying to go to. So we'll see those kind of things change as we go through that transition process. And in large scale ag, we'll see the same kind of things too. So.
Nice. Oh, Joe, had your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, well, Brian pretty much summarized what I wanted to say. One of the clients I worked with here that grows turkeys as their production, and they grow forage for for their livestock. One of the things that they noticed within one growing season, well, they were battling two different types of pioneer species, weedy stuff. And when they started incorporating living soil practices, they noticed that it just shifted to early to mid succession grass. They didn't seed anything. And then the weedy stuff just started disappearing. And it happened in multiple fields and they couldn't explain it. And so once you start to shift the soil's biological community, it's all anecdotal, but there seems to be a connection with the above ground system as well. So the seeds that have been dormant, it's almost like the microbes had woken them up because the seeds are there. The farmers have a seed bank, and it just so happens that the microbes that were thriving promoted the pioneer species, or the conditions of the soil promoted those pioneer species. And then you change the conditions, you get to see succession take place within one growing season.
I love how it's considered like just anecdotal. And it's absolutely the life shared experience of
Yeah.
Right.
and thousands of people, but we still have to be like, wait. It's still anecdotal.
Yeah.
It's amazing how
Yeah,
it
it's
Gotta
happens.
be a
true.
good
And like a
scientist.
breath, it's just like I'm no longer bull thistle. Now I'm beautiful clumping grass. Like what?
Yeah.
Oh, someone asked you a question and you answered it already, but can
Yeah.
we bring it up a little bit more around how you applied those compost extracts? Like Sophia ha asked Joe if did she just apply the compost extract to bare soil or was there a cover crop seed? I think this is a question a lot of people will want to hear from you about.
Yeah, so it was we didn't do compost extracts on bare soil. We focused on compost tea on bare soil. So the idea is to really activate the organisms in your amendment, your solid amendment, and then get them activated in your solution, your water, so that they can start the decomposition process of the residue that's already present in the soil. There is already organic matter, although very little organic matter in the soil. And so we wanted the biology to be active to produce those biofilm, the bacteria producing the biofilm in the water, stick to the organic matter and start to really restructure the soil itself. As far as the application rate goes, I think I mentioned 95 liters an acre, and he did like Ian just went head like basically just focused on bringing or putting out his treatment uh, before the weather starts to turn. So that was another thing that I'm thankful for clients who really adopt these practice and really take it seriously and commit the time to do it. So he did seven I think he did like every 7 to 10 days of treatment and and he did compost tea applications. He also added, which I know you'll probably talk about in your academy, the kelps, the fish hydrolysates, and all of these other microbial supplements. I like to call them microbial supplements. And really focusing on the diversity of ingredients that he's using to make his compost pile. So you have foods from these supplements, but you also have food already present in your compost. So and then we just kind of left it to the microbes to figure it out. We were really crossing our fingers and hoping for the best, and thankfully they delivered.
Yeah, and there was a question from Kip too. I think that it dovetails right into what you were just talking about, Joe, which was how do you figure out an application rate, right? What is the appropriate amount? Is 95 liters the right amount, not the right amount? And boy, it's such a weird thing because it really depends. The volume is not necessarily the key indicator. It is what is the microbial amount that's in there, the diversity and the biomass. And we use a microscope to kind of figure that out. But I'll tell you this, in my own personal yard, I don't do a microscope assessment of my compost extract and I calculate out and figure out how many gallons of extract am I going to put in my yard. I have just kind of figured out, okay, I'm going to make a batch of extract for my front yard and a extract for my backyard, and that's what I'm going to use. When I'm dealing with like large scale agriculture clients, the mindset's very different, which is how do I maximize my labor and my equipment usage so I can get the right amount of biology out there to be able to stimulate those plants. Then we'll do microscope assessments and we'll kind of figure out from there what is in that extract or tea that we're spraying and then to develop an application rate. So you don't have to make it complicated, but you can if you're going to be talking about like large scale kind of stuff. But if you're doing small scale, don't really worry so much about that. Just make sure you're making good compost and good extracts.
Yeah,
I
it's
love
usually
what Joe
some.
said about our compost, right? You brought up, you put the numbers up, and it was, if you're looking for, like, we'll get a catalyst all the time. People will call us, and there's rumors around the world that we have 7 to 1 or 10 to 1 fungal domination, which is absolutely not true. Typically we sit at like a 0.5 or a 1 to 1, maybe a little bit higher if it's good, but people will call just like, I need a 15 to 1 fungal to bacteria ratio compost because I'm planting an apple tree, and it's like, man, I wish I was that cool to be like, I know that if I make this compost and I add it in this way, that this is how the math is going to turn out. But it's a it's a little bit art and data. And I want to get into what Adam was talking about too earlier with the microscope, not liking counting, liking the exploration more. We don't have a whole ton of time, but I would really like to get into that a little bit before we get off of here. And also, Adam, if you could share more about your group. Everybody wants to know what the future is, what's going on, how do they join up? It's free, that's amazing. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I actually raised my hand when the extract rate thing came up because it's probably one of my biggest pet peeves that people take the chemical mindset of like parts per million nitrogen into this biological ecological thing, and they don't realize, okay, if you put out like even, there's not a lot of fungi in my compost. Oh no, if you create the right supportive conditions, the fungi expand their population. They find plants. They, grow into this. It's that whole continuum of like we get to influence things and set the stage. We don't really get to be the boss of these organisms and how they assemble and whatnot. So I just something always gets me surly in that zone when like not that I'm attacking the person who asked the question. I understand where the question comes from, but I hold some of the regenerative ag opinion leaders to blame for murkying this water and also kind of maybe trying to defend it against like some of the academics and stuff who are like, "Oh, we're used to seeing agronomy this way." And it's like, "Okay, this is a different mindset. We're not working with chemicals, we're working with organisms." Right? And so it's a great thing to do. Let me drop, if I can find it. I just put out a Substack note the other day where I kind of talk a little bit about the future of Holobiont Hub, which for now I'm putting it into a holding pattern of like it's not going to become a business anytime soon. It's just this informal thing, and that's where I want it to be. And it actually has a little bit more legal protection if it's just me standing on First Amendment rights versus trying to go the LLC route right now and collect money and all. So um, for now, it's about growing the community and having the interesting conversations and accumulating like organic matter in soil, the right conditions so that we can see where it goes down the line. So I don't offer classes or anything like that. We have a free composting primer that we just put up. Heather Borite and Tanya Decker really were like part of the co-creation team of that, and I'm very proud of it and the fact that it's completely free, like Creative Commons open access. I think it's a good, we call it a primer. It's a good way to get started to get your head wrapped around making compost in this way, using compost in this way. So I'll slap those two links in the chat.
Yeah, that sounds good. A lot of great questions here. Um, okay, question about plastic remediation. Ruben's asking, we're in the process of creating a food forest on land that has a lot of plastic waste. We've cleaned up most of the big pieces, but can you say something about the remediation of bioplastics? And yeah, there's
Or microplastics.
microplastics, yeah, of course.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any way to actually get them out. I think this is like something that the world's going to be dealing with now for the next thousands of years. I don't know. Yeah, once they break down, there's organisms that might absorb them on accident or like consume them, but it's not something that's going to really go away in a sense.
I mean, I think there's good news here is like microbes have been keeping up with, we're discussing, there's so many toxic waste piles that we've created all over the world. And time after time, science discovers, whoa, there's suddenly a microbe that eats this horrific thing and turns it into something a little less toxic. Um, I imagine plastic is going to have to be the same thing. And I think the work that we're doing, the work that all of us are doing, focusing on the soil microbiome is kind of like, it's like that how to train your dragon, how to train your microbes. We're training them on how to eat microplastics right now because we're all subscribing to plastic still, right? I mean, I do my best to have like cotton and hemp and like real non-plastic clothes, but my computer, my house, everywhere is this stuff. So, I mean, we are putting it out there, and with all hope, if we focus on biodiversity, it's going to get aggregated up and hopefully eaten by some organism out there.
Well, Kip said he had a comment. It's the worms, they eat the plastic. He's in Florida. Wiggle Brew is the company. Oh, a plastic eating worm. I know there's the mealworms that could eat styrofoam, can digest styrofoam, which is pretty wild. But Leighton Morrison had him on his program. And I screenshot that. Yeah, because if he
I
really
know
can show
Leighton
that,
well.
if he can really break down microplastics, that's a really cool
Well,
topic.
it's how pervasive. I mean, we were in
Yeah,
Costa Rica, in the jungles of Costa Rica. Remember, we were finding
yeah, so many plastics.
microplastics in the samples in the
Yeah,
jungle, which
finding
is like,
blue tarp in
yeah,
the samples in the
right,
forest. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
just got a hand up, guys.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, microplastics. That's a hard one because there's now, I guess, research where leafy vegetables are pulling up microplastics, so specifically lettuces and cabbages, um, which is really, I don't know, what can you do about it, right? It's hard because it's also disrupts our body, our hormones. So microbial remediation of microplastics versus flora remediation. I don't know. Hopefully we'll have some research in the next few years around that.
Yeah, Ethan, to put something out there, I just have to say his words were poetic. Fungi, the quiet alchemists of the forest floor, have learned to feast on our synthetic waste, transforming plastic into soil's poetry. Like tiny dragons of decay, they hoard humanity's discarded excess, breaking it down into something life can once again embrace. Wow, that was pretty cool.
Gorgeous. All right, a few questions here from Ethan, so maybe we can boil them down into. It's got like 6 questions, so maybe we could boil them down to three. I guess the first one, what are your favorite, what have your favorite extracts been? Do you have any basic recipes for drought tolerance or other basic issues that deserve an extract treatment to see the differences with or without? Have you tried extracts with pollen, like male pine pollen for enzyme benefits? Have you tried microgreen extracts? So maybe a little bit more about targeted extracts. Like, do you, Joe, Adam, Keisha, Casey, Brian, do you kind of try to create targeted extracts for different biomes, different plants, different contexts? How do you deal with that?
I guess I would say that, like, for the most part, like, if you're working on an area, just get extract out. Like, don't overthink it. Like, don't, like, find some good compost, make your own compost, make an extract, and just get it out. Like, it's always the first stage, is like Adam said, it's like being too worried about, like, oh, I only have 100 micrograms of fungi. It's like, but yeah, if you're dealing with an area that has no fungi, 100 micrograms of fungi is better than nothing. And if you have plants in that system, if you have, you're creating the space for them to thrive, and they have the ability to reproduce. So if you can get them into the zone, get them out there, and just promote their growth in any way you can, with most of the times just water and some kind of something to cover the ground, whether it be a living plant or some wood chips, that right there is the way to start. And just like try, get after it, put something out there and let it try, check it over time. But, just getting it out there, I feel like, is like the most important thing as far as step one is concerned with dealing with any kind of landscape, is just get it out, put it out, extract it, put it on the ground.
I would like to counter that with, if you've got the money, honey, I've got the time. Because I've got all kinds of ideas of ways that I would like to alter recipes to be crop specific, especially talking about mycorrhizal fungi and like how insane I could be with my input materials. But like, I'm just not there with cash yet. Most of my clients want me to go easy on their money. So when we're collecting data, it's like there's a lot of good enough happening. But if ever there's a benefactor out there that wants to drop a couple of million in my lap, I would love to do trials on crazy extracts. Absolutely opposite of what Casey says, but I think I would say Casey's right. I've just being simple. It was like, I thought Joe's presentation was so inspiring because it was like, is this gonna work? Well, it did, and it's beautiful. And then just to realize that like maybe they're not there. It's not like the pinnacle of the plant's experience in this world, but when we're talking about going from, moon rock bare ground to seeing green, like just her photos made me feel a little more comfortable. I was like, oh, all those different shades of green on that rooftop just really lit my brain up. So sometimes we have to be basic because there's just not enough money to support our awesome efforts.
Yeah, and our approach has been just diversity, 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 right? Making compost products that are highly diverse in the microorganisms so that we can target any kind of growing system really and get some kind of benefit out of there. And that's key. Sometimes with my clients, we'll go in and say, hey, let's go source compost from 2 or 3 different sources because it's going to bring a different set of diverse microorganisms together just to increase that diversity index. Great, but it's still the whole premise here is saying I'm not really tailoring it. I'm just trying to make sure I got diversity, so the plants that are there can say pick and choose the winners that they want to be able to utilize.
Nice. I had a question for Joe. I know in that really amazing moonscape conversion, the orchard, you started, it looked like there was nothing except dust and bacteria in that. And then the 2025 looks like it's beautifully healthy grassland or on the way towards the forest. What were some like subtle ecological indicators that you saw that like, hey, my this these applications of compost and extractor are having a good result? Like when did you start seeing things that made you feel like it was started to be successful?
Oh, when the cover crops germinated.
Hmm.
So when the seed bank that they applied, or the seeds that they applied from the year before, we actually saw them germinate a year after 3 treatments. And then just from there, Ian's also, so he's not just focusing on living soil, he's also putting in water management systems. He's also bringing in or installed a couple of ponds as well on the property. So over the years, he's seeing spiders show up for the first time. He's seeing all these birds come in, insects that he's never seen before. He saw, what did he see recently? Oh yeah, salamanders and frogs are starting to now appear in his landscape. And that valley where he is, a lot of the producers there, they grow hay. And so when they see Ian's field or Ian's property, they're starting to get more curious about it. And so not just the creatures that are starting to show up, but he's now affecting what the community feels about what he's doing. Because in the beginning, there was a lot of, I would say, not criticisms, but doubts about what he's trying to do. And so now he's developed a network of people that are kind of, okay, there's something to this. Um, so yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it's super cool. Yeah, the seeds from last year. Oh, they survived.
Adam's
So we
got
were just talking about that with
Oh yeah.
Brian, right? Brian, your client that was like the grapes that we've got the presentation on next week.
Right.
Took a they took a big risk. They didn't know anything about soil biology, and they teamed up with Brian and then our compost, and everyone thought they were crazy, like
Yeah.
literally crazy. Like the neighbors were making fun of them, and now that's not the same story.
He was the butt of the joke in that growing region for vineyards. It was like, oh, check out this guy. He's going crazy. And everybody had an opinion for him and, tried to say, you really should be doing, spraying Roundup on the middles and doing these things. And he ignored all of them to his credit. And now he's the only one that sold all of his grapes last year. All the other vineyards could not sell all their grapes. And he's locked in long-term contracts because the quality of his grapes are so good. And so it's kind of funny now. All of a sudden, his biggest detractors are now his biggest, cheerleaders. That they're like, "Oh, you should really check out what Alex is doing." It just blows his mind. It's like 5 years ago you thought I was nuts, and now all of a sudden, now I'm on the right path. It's just true testament, to him saying, "Oh, I chose the right way." So
It's funny to think
that's
that we
great.
get a job sometimes because it's like it's literally happened to us at least 3 or 4 times where it's like so and so is making fun of me and doesn't believe in me and I want to prove them wrong. And it doesn't really have to do with like crop. They're just like, I'm sick of hearing my dad's voice. Like I want him to believe in my It's
Yep.
like back to high school. That's how we get a little bit of our work.
Well, there's a powerful motivation in like, oh yeah, I'll prove you
I'll show
wrong.
you.
That's so many people have that stories. What was it like Greg Judy? He was like, "You're stupid, you're never gonna do it." And that was the moment I knew I was gonna be a rancher.
Gabe
You know?
Brown has the same kind of thing
Yeah,
where it's
just
like, yeah.
the powerful motivation.
Yeah.
But Adam, you have your hand raised real quick.
Oh, I found something that I wanted to share in chat, which has nothing to do with soil, but it's a really cool recent paper where somebody had a bunch of money given to them by a benefactor of some kind, Keisha, and they were like, let's test people's blood glucose after eating these specific, like, meals if they walk 10 minutes directly after, or if they wait half an hour, or if they wait an hour, and all this stuff. And to me, it kind of it makes me think of the really cool process of anecdote to data or to science, where you notice a trend. And we were talking earlier about succession. I did restoration in a tall grass prairie, and I was like, oh, everything is sunflowers and artemisia. Oh, next year we're getting some grasses. Oh, a few years later we're getting milkweeds and compass plant in here. Like that succession just being seen by the eye, but then testing it, right? I do think that there's a problem where a lot of voices out there that write books and stuff are doing it in an agricultural context that's very specific, in a climate, in a soil type and all. And then they're like, here's the recipe, people. And it kind of trains people to think, or here's the Harry Potter potion class potion. And if you do it one step wrong, you'll turn into a cat instead of, whatever else you're trying to turn into. And I don't think it works that way. I think nature has these big trends and patterns, and like we can learn how to sort of dance with it, but it's not controllable in that way. And even big scale agribusiness, I have a lot of challenges for people that want to just formalize, everything and have it, okay, I can't predict the 5,000 things out there this year that are going to be different. Nobody can. Um, so you pull a lot of data together over time. You pull a lot of what Joe notices and what Keisha notices and what I notice, and you do get someone to do the highly replicated study or whatever, and then you can finally go like, okay, well, here's the optimal 10-minute walk after dinner. Okay, there, we did it. We scienced it. And that's great. But we're not there yet with a lot of the stuff in this movement. And I just, I hear a lot of people with some impressive case studies and stories, even the elders of the movement sometimes, and I just shake my head because I'm like, that only happened in Iowa. And it is probably not going to happen in Argentina that way.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's good. It's something that we try to, when you see someone, it's something to look out for when someone's telling you this is how to do it. That's my number one indicator that that person might not necessarily fully understand the topic.
Right.
Because there is no one way fits all for every situation.
I think it's more if you have the knowledge of the system and how it works, and you have a set of tools that you can then utilize. It's the intersection of those two things that helps you figure out what is the right thing to do. And then obviously using your observations, all that being data or being your eyes or whatever else. But yeah, just applying a recipe. And that's the thing. Commercial, conventional agriculture in today's world is all formulaic. They live and die on formulas. And it's such a hard thing to get people out of that paradigm. But when they do, they thrive. They get stuck in there, it's hard to pull them out. It's like, come on, just don't worry about the formula. You get past that.
Cool. Well, I see. Maybe let's do one more question. I feel like that might be a good place to end. So it's like from Ethan, what is the opinion on the microbiometer? Do you feel like their testing shows results? Do you have anybody who knows much about the microbiometer? I'd have
We
to,
had
I
one of our
figure.
colleagues do some testing on it, and it showed it was different from when we do a
Mhm.
microscopy analysis. But with any tool, if as long as you can repeat the test and then you're looking for a trend, has the trend changed over time? That's some valuable information. I don't personally don't use a microbiometer. I don't know anybody who really does as far as their practice, but maybe it could be a good tool to use. I don't know, panelists, do you guys have any experience with it?
All I know is Matt Powers is popularizing it, so I hear this question all the time. But again, I think I've got a pile of Matt Powers questions. We have to do a webinar
Yep,
to
yep,
keep her
sure.
because
Yeah.
I've not ever even held a microbiometer in my hand. Carl here seems to have some experience with it, maybe.
In
Oh,
general,
it's a
I think
summary.
it would take 50 different tests to even start to get to the real, like, accurate stuff with these biological systems. I did a lot of phospholipid fatty acid analysis in grad school. They have problems. As I've mentioned, almost all microscopy stuff has bias issues. Um, I'm not gonna like name and shame too many things, except soil enzymes are really hot right now in the scientific world, and my buddy has done a bunch of work with them, and he says they're all a mess, and like don't trust anything that says the soil enzyme analysis is really spot on. And so
Right,
these systems are just noisy and messy, and like I wouldn't tell anybody like bet the farm on one
right.
thing.
Yeah. I think if you use a tool and you collect data from it, and then you can see changes over time and you can start trending a change, then that's probably some value. But just saying the microbiometer is the gold standard or the microscopy is the gold standard, and this is, your accurate data. I agree with you, Adam. There's a lot of variability and conflict in there as far as it being the gold standard necessarily. Yep.
All right. Well, I think it's a good place to Ruben was just asking about the Matt's microscope book. Do you remember the title here?
It's regenerative. I was just actually trying to, I was like, I don't know if
This
I'm
is
back.
regenerative microscopy.
Regenerative microscopy. I
There it
don't.
is. Well, there's regenerative soil,
There's
then he has
soil. Oh,
regenerative
is that the book?
microscopy. Yeah, his
Sorry. Yeah.
quick, fetch it, Brian.
Whoo, my
Quick,
library
quick.
behind me. Yep.
I love that. I love that book because our compost gets like
Yeah,
he
it does.
really put a lot of effort into testing our compost and putting a lot of data out that we would never do ourselves.
Yeah.
I love I love the way he talks about our compost in that book. It's really sweet. I like his photos too. He does a lot of like comparing images at 100 times 100x total magnification, which is nice. I think it's a good book. It's an interesting read, at least. Um, yeah, with lots of good
Yeah.
images.
That was a very fun read.
Hmm.
All right, everybody. Well, I think we've reached a really good conclusion on today's panel webinar. Again, mind-blowing, amazing case studies. Thank you so much, Joe, for being on here. Thank you, Adam. It's been really awesome seeing your work and your science and your approach, your mindsets. And thank you, Keisha, Casey, Brian. And everybody, thanks for tuning in for another Compost Academy webinar. We hope this is getting you really enthusiastic about actually getting out there and composting and making extracts and interacting with your garden. Because really, this is a relationship, and we want you to have a really wonderful relationship with your soil, with your plants, with your ecosystem. And we love making that possible. Next, keep an eye on your inbox. I'm going to try to get out a replay today of the webinar. And next week, we've got a really exciting webinar coming up about that vineyard case study Brian mentioned about the grape grower who just totally sold out thanks to using extracts. That's a really cool story. So we're looking about having him on next week. All right, everybody. We'll have a fantastic weekend and hopefully we'll see some of you next week. Ciao, everybody.
Thanks,
Sweet.
Bye,
everyone.
Thanks,
everyone.
Raleigh.
Thanks for having
Bye.
me.